Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are now in day 65 of the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. And if you look on my Google Earth, you will see I have pulled up the office of the president of the Ukraine. And very, very large, expansive complex, multi-story, obviously. And I guess the question is why am I displaying the office of the president of Ukraine? Well, recently the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, did an interview with a number of news outlets and magazines, Time magazine for one. And I don't know if Zelensky was having a Batman moment, quite possibly. Maybe he and the person from the Time magazine were both having a Batman moment together. It's hard to say, but in the interview, Zelensky alleges that Russian forces, Russian Spetsnaz or some sort of special operations force, had launched two attacks on his presidential site, on where he was located at the night of the initial start of the invasion. Now, was he at this site here, the office of the president? Very difficult to say. Not sure the specific locale. But again, he alleges that at least two attempts were made to either capture and or kill him. And in the continuing interview, at one point, Zelensky also alleges that Russian forces had parachuted into Kiev. So that's kind of difficult to get your head around and believe. You would see an airborne operation in downtown Kiev, and don't think it, while not impossible, I would say it was highly unlikely. Now, is there a possibility that there were infiltrators in Kiev that may have made it an attempt at some sort of operation? Possibly, but I find it I don't find it very credible, and the reason I say that is for a couple of different reasons. Well, first, in the interview, he alleges that automatic weapons were being passed out to basically cabinet members and his family to protect themselves from these Russian special forces that were attacking the complex or the area where he was staying. And the reason I find that very, very difficult to believe is, believe it or not, Zelensky is more protected than the president of the United States. Even at the White House, you do not see the kinds of and levels of protection that is afforded to the president of Ukraine, and especially in terms of what is going on right now, those capabilities were probably elevated. At the White House, you have uniformed Secret Service agents. You have obviously plainclothes Secret Service agents. You have quite possibly some sort of rapid reaction SWAT type unit on standby. But there's not a Marine infantry battalion protecting the president at all times. Usually it's the Secret Service, Uniform Division, then followed by the special agents, and then the local municipalities, such as the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, Prince George's County Police Department, also assist in what would be defined as some sort of crisis situation at the White House. They would obviously intervene. But I wanted to take a look at the protection that Zelensky had around him at the night of the invasion, and I think this is important. And we're going to start kind of outside of what would be closest to him and kind of work our way more towards Zelensky himself. So in Kiev, obviously, you have the Ukrainian National Guard, and located very close to Kiev, just to the north of Kiev, you have the Omega Counter-Terrorism Group. It's a special operations capable unit of the Ukrainian National Guard. In the downtown vicinity of Kiev, in the outskirts of Kiev, you also have the 25th Public Protection Brigade, which has 5 battalions allocated to that brigade. Closer to downtown Kiev, you have the 22nd Diplomatic Security Brigade. So that would be a force that would be ready to respond if there was some sort of Russian operation within the environments of downtown Kiev towards the presidential complex. You also have the 4th Rapid Reaction Brigade, which consists of 2 infantry battalions and 1 tank battalion. And that, generally speaking, that unit is north of Kiev, and in all probability that unit was tied down with the Russian operation near Hostomel. But the next layer of protection is going to be the independent presidential regiment. So the president of Ukraine has his own military protection brigade from the Ukrainian ground forces that are assigned to protect him. And I would assume that this regiment would be located on or very, very close to the presidential complex. And the organizational chart of that regiment consists of 2 mechanized infantry battalions, probably about 600 to 700 armed individuals with infantry fighting vehicles, and then a special purpose company, a rapid reaction special purpose company of the independent presidential brigade, and then 1 military police company. So in excess of 1,000 to 1,200 armed individuals in that regiment, directly responsible for the security of the president of Ukraine. And obviously, those forces would have been on a much heightened state of alert leading up to the actual operation. And then you have the 101st Brigade for the protection of the General Staff. We believe this unit has roughly 3 battalions. Now, obviously, this unit would be more or less stationed over by the Defense Ministry and involve itself in the protection of members of the General Staff. But those forces could also respond in case of, obviously, an operation that would be directed towards the presidential complex. So not probably directly responsible for Zelensky's security, but nonetheless, if there was some sort of airborne operation or something that would be occurring, I would have to say that this unit would definitely have certain elements that would also respond if called upon. And then finally, last but not least, the inner protection is provided by the Ukrainian Security Service. And you have members of the elite Alpha unit that, again, is more or less like a Tier 1 special operations unit, counter terror, hostage rescue type unit that would definitely be on standby in case of some sort of operation against Zelensky were to occur. So a vast array, quite literally, of thousands of personnel that would go into the protection of the president of Ukraine, and that's not even taking into account local police forces as well that absolutely would probably come to the assistance if there was some sort of Russian operation. So again, you got the independent presidential brigade with 2 mechanized infantry battalions. You've got the National Guard right there down in downtown Kiev with multiple battalions. You have the 22nd Diplomatic Security Brigade. You've got the 4th Rapid Reaction Brigade. My guess is that unit would have been tied down in Hostomel and probably would be out of the equation. You also have the Omega Counterterrorism Unit there as well, and then you have the security services of Ukraine. So the idea that they would be passing out AK variants to the lawmakers of Ukraine or the president's family himself, I just find it very, very difficult to believe. And the Russians would have this information, obviously, on what units are there that protect Zelensky. And it would have been very, very difficult to get a unit large enough into Kiev that could take down all these protection assets that surround Zelensky. And that's just that's open source information that we have. And that's not to say there's other Ukrainian military units in downtown Kiev. So the likelihood that this would have even been considered a remotely successful operation by the Russians is very unlikely. And then you have to look at even if there were Russian infiltrators in downtown Kiev, and they were able to make some sort of a successful attempt on the presidential complex, which is highly, highly doubtful. The chance of success was just incredibly remote. And then those forces, those Russian forces, would not be assisted by any sort of follow-on forces, as the closest Russian unit that was landing was many miles outside of Kiev at this airbase, and it had its hands full. That whole equation went back and forth, fighting with various Ukrainian National Guard units, and then finally Russian airborne forces were able to push their way down after about 24 hours, and then eventually and ground forces, and then eventually seized control of Hostomel Airport. But that was far from downtown Kiev, and in my guess, you would have maybe at best a few dozen Spetsnaz infiltrators in downtown Kiev that would have some sort of ability to launch an operation on the presidential complex. But the likelihood of success would almost be zero, given that Zelensky, the amount of protection that he has. So I don't know. I find that that article by Time and what allegedly Zelensky said as not being credible. I understand it's propaganda, and I understand that Time magazine and some of these other magazines, they do want to portray Zelensky in a brave light, and obviously that was the intent of that piece, where it made it look like he was picking up an AK-47 and defending his family, and his closest confidants were also armed, and they were what was protecting Zelensky and fighting off these Russian Spetsnaz. But that's not the case. It's just not what actively happened. There were thousands of security personnel involved around that presidential complex, and the chance that actually occurred, I think, is very, very remote at this point. But the war continues. We are continuing to see the Russians starting to have more success. As I talked about yesterday, specifically south of Izium, and now it sounds like after much artillery strikes on the town of Lyman, it sounds like Ukrainian forces may be starting to pull out of that town and retreat from Lyman. And as you can see here on the map, the Russian forces continue to pound away and make very, very slow advances in terms of ongoing operations, especially near Severodonetsk, Lyman, and just south of Izium. Not a lot to talk about in terms of what is happening actively on the ground. There has not been a lot of changes. The only real reports are continued operations near Mariupol. There was a new report that came out that said up to 7 Russian backfire bombers dropped large ordnances, possibly bunker busting type munitions on the metallurgical factory where all these Ukrainian forces are holed up, the kind of the last remnants of what is operating near Mariupol, to the east of Mariupol in terms of the metallurgical plant. And then the fighting continues along the southeastern front. Again, the Ukrainians continue to fortify Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, and it's a very, very slow slog right now for the Russians. And I would say right now it's up in the air if this operation is going to be successful. As I talked about before, the possibility that Russia could declare some sort of mass mobilization and acknowledge that it is in a state of open war, not just with Ukraine, but quite possibly a proxy war with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization as well, and look to spur some sort of national support and national mobilization to try and get a grip on things. As I talked about even prior to the conflict, that if the Russians were looking at seizing much of Ukraine or even the eastern portions of Ukraine, some sort of national mobilization was going to have to occur. And we haven't really seen that yet in terms of that sort of mass mobilization. Is some sort of mobilization by the Russians underway? Yes, there is, but probably not the required mobilization that they're going to have to do in order to overcome the Ukrainian military and Ukrainian state at this point. The Ukrainians are all in and fully mobilized and or fully mobilizing to counter this Russian operation. So the prospect that this eventually happens, I say, is very likely in terms of a Russian mass mobilization and the acknowledgement by Vladimir Putin that they are in a war right now. And then furthermore, we have to look at other areas as well. The Transnistria region. There continues to be the possibility of that escalating into something greater than what it currently is right now. We are hearing reports that Transnistria is mobilizing its forces, calling up some of its reserves. This is that independent enclave of Moldova. It's set in between Ukraine and Moldova, and the reality is really those Russian forces are designed to protect the large weapons depot that is located. I think it's right here. If I could be right, yeah, it's right here, and it's near this town of Kobanasa, and that's the weapons depot, and that's really what Russian forces are there for in the Transnistria region, not just peacekeeping forces, but to protect this large ammo depot, which is very, very close to the Ukrainian border. And at some point, could we see a Ukrainian operation to seize control of that, or quite possibly engage some of those Russian units in this area at some point? That's so obviously open to speculation. And that's the main city that's under the control of Russian and Russian proxies. That airport is not in use, by the way. But that's kind of what we're hearing in regards to this area, the Transnistria area. But we've seen multiple possible attacks occur on communication stations in this area now. Some are calling it a false flag. Others not so much that it could be an operation by Ukrainian or Ukrainian security services, which is probably more likely. I don't see the Russians launching any sort of operations out of this area. I think the Ukrainians could very quickly attack and reduce the Russian forces that are located in this area fairly quickly, probably. And I don't see it as a threat to Ukraine. Obviously, if the Russians had established some sort of a bridgehead closer to Odessa, and we're looking to link up to that area, that may change things a bit, especially if the Russians had the ability to fly forces in, but they don't have that ability right now for a variety of reasons. And the Russians are kind of stuck right now to the southeast of Mykolaiv, within the vicinity of Kherson, and there's not been a lot of movement within that area right now. So that's kind of where we're at for today. We'll continue to monitor, report, and bring you information. Thanks for joining us.